Hi everyone, welcome to ArtsFest Online. Today we have two events coming up for you. A bit later on we will be joining Lisa Blower and RM Francis about their new work and recent publications. If you haven't booked on, then please do so via Eventbrite. But first, please join me in welcoming Dr Max Stewart in conversation with glass artist Allister Malcolm. Over to you, Max.
Hello there, thank you very much, Claire. Hi Alistair, how are you doing?
Hi Max, I'm doing well, are you?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. So you're an alumni of Wolverhampton School of Art, you're a trustee of the British Glass Foundation, an honorary freeman of the Worshipful Company of Glass Sellers of London, and you run a studio out of the White House Cone Museum of Glass.
Yeah, that all rolls off the tongue really easily, doesn't it?
How has lockdown been for you?
Well, quite extraordinary, really, in loads of ways. I mean, it was sort of a moment that takes everybody's breath away, I'm sure, and takes the wind out of everybody's sails. But prior to lockdown, we could kind of get a sense of what was going to happen. We were in the fortunate position where I needed to get a few orders produced and out the door before we could lock down. But obviously, then we were unable to make glass in the hot glass studio without maintaining social distances. And so it was obvious that we were going to have to shut down the hot glass studio until we could find some sensible working practices to make it safe to re-enter the space. So we motored on to initially get those orders done, and then unfortunately had to close down. And I guess it was at that moment, you know, the phone stopped ringing and the world kind of all went into their own homes, and we all wondered when we were ever going to come out again. And I think, well, for me certainly, I thought there's a few moments where you think, well, does what I do really matter in the grand scheme of things? Because you know, there's a lot of people talking about key workers being, you know, having a real valid importance in the economic nature of what our communities are all about. It's sort of quite a tough moment, actually, where you do quite a lot of soul searching to kind of think, well, really, is what I do important? And there were a few weeks where I have to say I did quite a lot of deep soul search about that, but actually I realised that art is a really important part of communities. Without it, you know, it will be quite a depressing place. And there's a lot of joy to be had from not only receiving and looking at it, but also for making it. And I kind of know that that's what is what I'm all about. And so it didn't take me long to sort of bounce back from that, from those moments. Think, you know, actually, it's something that I'm very passionate about doing, and I certainly want to carry on doing it. And so. The sun came out, and I enjoyed it. I felt a little bit guilty about it, but I enjoyed a few weeks of contemplation in the sunshine in my back garden. And from that moment on, I think it was a moment to recharge my batteries, because I've been working quite hard. And it was a moment to sort of work out a strategy of where to go from here on, really. So since then, we've been fortunate enough to apply to the Arts Council for their emergency funding, which was all about how artists may use the grant to put themselves in a stronger position, having suffered the effects of COVID-19, and how we would move forward with that. And prior to lockdown, I'd had a lot of new work photographed, and the plan was to finish and change quite a lot of my online presence. So the plan was to finish that story with the website, finish updating it, and really motor on with the grant that the Arts Council awarded. So it's that was a huge piece of positive news quite early on in lockdown. So yeah, it's been there have been some delays, because obviously a lot of people are working from home. But I'm quite excited about the what is due to come from that whole project, really.
That's fantastic. I mean, what's been very interesting about lockdown is how important the arts actually have been across the board to people in the last 3 or 4 months. You know, and I think our subject is as important as anything else, you know.
Yes.
So that's interesting. So how diverse do you have to be to survive, do you think?
Well, I guess prior to lockdown, we were already quite diverse. And in terms of running a hot glass studio, I think you have to be pretty diverse in what you want to do in order to keep the studio running. For a lot of artists, they may not want to run a hot glass studio because the commitment to run the furnace, you know, once you switch it on, the ideal is to maintain a temperature all year round and then continue working with it. So to justify the expense, it needs to be used 3 to 5 days a week, depending on the type of work you're doing. And that's quite a big commitment. I kind of personally love a variety of different jobs and within the studio. So we've been fortunate enough to produce pieces that were selected for the Biennale last year called Bubble Wrap, and they're sort of conceptual pieces which led to a decorative vase.
That's the vase behind your left shoulder.
Oh yeah, oh, sorry, wrong shoulder. Yes, the one here. It was in the Biennale and was spotted by a museum in Germany, but also a museum in Florida. And so we just finished producing pieces for collections, for permanent collections in both those museums. So that's one avenue. The other avenue is because people have recognized that I've developed a certain skill level, we can produce all manner of shapes and employ all sorts of manner of processes to create solutions for short runs of objects. And so we're now sort of in this fortunate position where we're approached to do all the weird and wonderful. So I guess just a month prior to lockdown, we were approached by a film company to produce a glass slipper. And, and that's the production method of that was fairly insane. And so I captured a lot of the footage of doing that on camera and then produced a video which people can have a look on my YouTube channel, which is just under my own name, Allister Malcolm. But that's an example of, I guess, a corporate sort of project that's thrown our way. And quite often they want some creative solutions bringing to the table, and I kind of enjoy that. But currently we're working on a 35-piece chandelier where somebody's asked us to simply produce some shades to a specific shape, and there aren't many people who can do short runs of bespoke work, and so we're currently doing that. So it's quite a mix, and I kind of enjoy that mix personally. It's sort of it means that we're continually learning. In order to get the lampshades produced this week, we've had to learn 3 or 4 new processes, right. And it's been like like going back to university. Actually, it's been good fun.
That sounds terrific. I mean, are you carrying on working at the moment with commissions and things, or are you able to just do the work for yourself? You know,
we've been doing a number of different things. So I've been at the moment we've started to work again. We put quite an in-depth risk assessment in place. The team is small in itself, and so we've created, if you like, a bubble of a small group of people. We've purchased new tools, so we're from a company called Glass Toolbox, I believe, run by one of your ex-graduates as well, James Devereaux. He's developed an adapter which can be plugged onto the end of a blowing iron, and that means that if you are sensible about who's going to do which role within the hot shop, you no longer need to share mouthpieces, so there's not going to be the transmission of germs within the studio. we've actually, that the pieces that we're making are so large, we've actually hooked that up to a compressor. So although I've been making glass for the last few weeks, I haven't actually blown anything because the compressor's been doing all the job. And it's and in some ways it's kind of easier. So we're kind of liking a lot of the solutions we're finding within the studio itself. You know, there's certain things that we're doing to make the place a more sterile environment as well. And you kind of think, oh my goodness, why weren't we doing this 5 years ago? You know, it's just simple things like adding Milton to the buckets of water, so that actually you're continually sort of cleansing your hands whilst working as well. And yeah, so it's been, we're fortunate enough that we've managed to find quite a few solutions to carry on as a small team. And I think the benefit I've got with knowing people within the worshipful company of glass sellers is that there's a trade body called British Glass, who advise ministers on the effects legislation may have on industry. And these guys know processes from bottling manufacturers to massive sheet glass manufacturers, but they also know the intricacies of hand-blown, handmade glass. And so prior to us starting out, I was able to seek advice from their director before we could start. So it was, I was quite fortunate in that way.
That's fantastic. I mean, tell us a bit about the bubble wrap series. I mean, what is it exactly that you've been doing with it?
Well, we effectively the idea came from was kind of I wasn't searching for an idea, and sometimes I find that that's when the most interesting ideas actually hit you, is when you're not trying to torture yourself over a concept, you know. And I was actually, as part of my life was getting quite stressful because of wearing different caps, and I took on a hobby of diving just as a means of escapism. And it struck me that partway through the day, while I was submerged at 16 meters, I was sort of lying on my back, just breathe. Every time you breathe, there's a visual bit of excitement where you release all these bubbles. You know, as you're walking around and out there, you're not aware of how much you breathe, but there's underwaters. There's a visual thing that happens every time you exhale. And of course, I then just lie there watching my breath disappear to the surface. And I guess a lot of divers who've been doing it for a long time, you know, they're seeking deeper waters, bigger fish, and greater things. But for me, just that experience of watching bubbles was quite just nice escapism. But it just struck me that it was a funny thing to do. That on my day off from blowing bubbles, I was going to blow bubbles, and actually that got me ticking over, thinking, well, I could have some fun in producing a piece that played on that. But equally, at the same time, we're faced with sort of I guess because of the diving community and the education I was going through, it's all about respecting being aware of what's happening environmentally, and single-use plastics being one of the public enemy number one, if you like. For a glass artist, bubble wrap is you know, one of the most important materials we can use in terms of transporting things around. And so I thought it would be kind of fun to do a little bit of an ode to the material itself. And so all these ideas kind of came together to produce these pieces. So there's a vessel essentially which is coated in numerous bubbles that are all welded to the outside, and then the internal skin of that vessel is then mirrored so that you get a lot of reflective qualities within it. So there's a lot going on in them visually, and well, they're just a fun reminder actually of my trips underwater. So.
Exactly. How easy was it to translate it into glass, though? You say it's a kind of collection of bubbles.
It was quite tricky because to blow the bubble, the initial bubbles is fairly straightforward. I say that with 20 years experience. but then to weld on another bubble and try and not let it distort too much, but try and weld it to the surface so that it adheres and becomes part of the piece was quite a task. So there were quite a few failures, and it was a matter of learning how much heat I could introduce to the outside skin once we've applied so many bubbles onto the outside of another one, really. But there was what I learned was that the further I could play and push and use the heat, the more interesting these distortions came on the surface. So it's tricky to begin with, and then once you start to build up a huge number of these bubbles, there's actually the physical problem, because it becomes heavier and heavier and heavier, and you realize that you're committed to completely covering a piece, but you know 3/4 of the way through you really want to give in because it's getting heavy.
Of course.
Yeah.
And the glass slipper, what is that about? Are you allowed to talk about it?
I'm allowed to mention that we produced the glass slipper. That was it's for a film of which the theme you will probably guess, and we spent quite a bit of time learning how to manipulate a bubble into a high heel shoe shape, and I guess the best thing to do would be to tease people to say that the majority of the information can be found and learned about on the YouTube channel. But I can't really speak too much about the film itself or the title of the film, because that's all hush hush at the moment.
Okay, all right, we'll respect that. But the commissions that you receive, I mean, do you go out and you know, tout for these things, or do people come to you, or is it a mixture?
I guess it's fair to say we tout for them, but the nature of the way we tout for them has completely changed over the 20 years of me graduating. You know, when I graduated, we had to have 35mm slides, printed photographs, and JPEGs, because some galleries weren't quite modcon, didn't have all the modcons, and we still sent faxes then as well. So you had to, it was quite expensive, because you not only had to produce a lot of printed material, you had to equip yourself with everything to send everything out in every format. And the response time was pretty slow, because you would have to post things out quite often. And so at the same time, I was doing a lot of trade shows, and that's ranged from local ones in Birmingham through to, well, from the NEC to then trade shows down in London. And I represented myself over in New York at the International Gift Fair for 5 years on the trot, and did pretty well exporting work overseas. But as the exchange rate sort of fell out of our favour, I then started to focus on what could be done in England and the UK, really. And at that time, you know, the internet really took over. We carried on doing trade shows, and I guess that's where I was meeting and building the majority of my client base, and building up contacts. Quite often, I wouldn't necessarily meet contacts at the trade shows, but just the fact that you've got an event to promote to the world means that you might get noticed via other avenues just for taking part in it. And it's certainly good to have an annual event that you sort of relaunch something time and time again. But for the last, I guess it's maybe 5 or 6 years, I haven't participated in a trade show as such, and I've opted for, within the art world, trying to exhibit at high-end events, and certainly competing to go into the International Festival of Glass, so that we can kind of showcase what we do there. Then I've also spent a lot more time recording and documenting what I do, so that I could put things online in terms of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, so that people can kind of see from the comfort of their own home what we do. And And actually, the inquiries that were coming in because of being able to talk about what we could do meant that people could see that we've got all sorts of tricks within our trade, and they could see that we like generally the one-off work. So it led to more interesting inquiries coming in. At the same time, I produced a digital catalogue. So for the last few years, if galleries wanted to see work, we would email over information, and they'd probably host a sort of like we are now, a video call, just to discuss things in a little bit more detail. And quite often, if the gallery was very interested, I'd organise a gallery visit, because one of the things I learned was that at a trade show, a gallery owner or a buyer, they're under so much pressure. For instance, I think at the NEC, if you were to walk down every single aisle, you may walk the distance of 2 marathons. So there's a huge amount of information to go through, and if you're looking for inspiration as a buyer at one of these trade shows, then you may not find it physically by walking up and down the aisles. So to sort of do a little bit of research off your own back and target people and suggest a visit worked actually in our favour. Quite often galleries would spend a lot more quality time with you having arranged a visit rather than saying, oh, quickly, can I grab your literature? I've got another 26 miles to run. So times have changed in how we tout, certainly, but also I guess because of being fortunate enough to build up a good reputation, now people seem to come to us via word of mouth as well. So it's we're quite lucky in that respect.
And having an online presence as well, you talk about YouTube, websites, that type of thing. I mean, it's something you advocate for, all makers to really kind of get out there and to kind of promote themselves, really. Yeah,
I think there's a tricky balance. I've got friends who will show the spaghetti they've had for tea one evening as well, and I don't know whether we need to see every detail of their lives, but certainly snippets of information about test pieces, developments, even the disaster. I think even the disasters are good to show, because people then they get an understanding of how difficult things are that you're actually trying to achieve. If we make things look too easy, then it almost devalues what you do. So the odd calamity isn't a bad thing for people to see as well, I don't think.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I think, it's kind of interesting to show your disasters as well as your successes. It's kind of encouraging that you're human.
Well, I think Dyson was quite famous in saying they learned nothing if they didn't make mistakes. He's a real advocate of learning from people's mistakes, actually.
Yeah, exactly. Now, yesterday you were on television.
Yes.
Home is where the art is. Tell us more about that. It was a very beautiful piece, which
thank you.
I've seen on Facebook, beautifully shot by Simon Bruntnell.
Yeah.
How was the whole experience for you?
Well, it was quite a surreal one, and I applied to be part of it last year, and was shortlisted, and then went on holiday and forgot to follow up on it. And so they rang me this year and said, why didn't you finish off the application process? So when I fessed up, they asked me to carry on with the selection process, and then I found out shortly afterwards I was selected. And prior to the program, the day of filming, all I knew is that I was going to need to turn up somewhere in the country to have a snoop around the house, and that was it. And I would be given a brief. And 24 hours before the day of filming, I was given a postcode to turn up at, and there I rocked up. I was given the time that I needed to be there, and we had to snoop around this house. Obviously, I wasn't to know that they were going to be lottery winners, and it was going to be a rather grand house.
Yeah, that was rather special.
Yeah, so we're somewhat spoilt with the with the space that I had to play with. And from there on, it was really good fun, actually. You know, they were so good at nursing us through the process. You know, the whole idea was that we would, without the buyers present, we would snoop around the house and try and get some sort of sense of what the characters were like that lived there, and what they may or may not like, and how you might be able to produce a piece for them. And I honed in on the fact that they were very avid football fans, and the fact that they'd won the lottery. I like the idea of producing a piece that had a conceptual similarity to a game of football, and as you know, the piece was called "Life's a Game of Two Halves."
Yeah.
And so then, for the following few weeks, the film crew followed you through the process of how you would develop that idea conceptually. I'd made the conscious decision that I wasn't going to turn up with any preconceived idea. You know, I think the easy route would have been to kind of go, oh, I'm going to make them a yellow cat, or I'm going to make them a blue bubble wrap piece, and that will do them. But I like the idea of showcasing from beginning to end that there's a real value in commissioning an artist, because what you get is not something off the shelf. You get an artistic response to what you're being asked of, so I really wanted to do something unique for them, and it was quite challenging in the time we got, but well, challenging because the film crew was following every move, and that adds a little bit of pressure in the background. But you know, I was really happy with the piece. So yeah,
it looked magnificent.
Thank you.
I mean, you know, they seemed genuinely surprised and delighted by it. You know, yeah. I mean, was it a good experience working with people who kind of were commissioning a piece like that?
Yeah, it was. The tricky part, usually what I would do in the commissioning process is we would, this is where the TV show flew in the face of what I would do professionally. So professionally, if somebody commissioned us and we had a look around a house, I would create either a mood board, or I'd create drawings and give people 3 options and ask for some feedback. Yeah. But the TV show, you weren't allowed to do that, and they discouraged any mood boards, because what they really wanted was, they wanted a grand reveal at the end, and for you to verbally describe what you were going to be able to do. So the viewing may seem a little strange, because there were no visuals leading up to the reveal, but that was why. And so it was good in a way, but because the work's kind of abstract, they really couldn't get a sense of what was coming their way. And I guess for the guy I was competing with, he did quite a literal commission, where he was producing a cat with a tree and a dog. You know, the minute somebody says something like that, you can immediately generate a picture in your mind's eye of what's going to be created. And so I think for them it might have been difficult to understand where I was going, because and it was difficult for me as well, because without the ability to kind of go, here's a drawing of what I'm expecting to give you, that they were a little in the dark. So it was nice that in the end they liked it, but they had to choose one. So
yeah, no, I don't think they chose the right one, but that's just me. You know, so what's next for you? The White House Cone Museum of Glass, what's the next stage with that? Because you're heavily involved in its opening.
Yeah, so I'm a trustee for the British Glass Foundation, the charity that will be running the museum. And over the last 8 years, we've been battling to raise money, raise awareness, and build a business plan to create a sustainable museum that will be here for, you know, the next 100 years or so. And we've finally pulled together all the funding from a heritage fund, and we've got we're at the exciting part now, where we've got the match funding that we need, and we've got permission to start. We were interviewing last week for a director, the director is due to start in September, and we're at the point where we're going to start interviewing design teams for the fit out. And I think it's been really exciting for me. I'm not really a glass historian. I know what I like, and I guess really my cup of tea is the contemporary glass. I'll always be drawn to that, and I didn't really know a lot about the historical side of it. And I think for me, if I enter a museum and it's heavily laden with a lot of text, on my day off, quite often I won't really want to absorb that. And for the last decade, visiting museums with children, I have to absorb the information in the museum at the rate that my children want to. Otherwise, they're just told, "Dad, hurry up, please." I've been explaining this to a lot of the trustees behind the scenes, saying, I think that the real trick for the museum here is to try and develop displays that are going to appeal across the board, not just to glass specialists, to the families of Dudley, and we really got to try and engage and enthuse the next generation of glass lovers. I'm quite excited about what the design teams are going to bring to the equation, and the next 18 months in this building there's going to be a lot of activity going on.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really good. So you're going to try and meld the contemporary along with the historic, and are there going to be kind of revolving exhibitions of that?
So there's, I think the nature of the beast is that we want to tell the story of Stourbridge glass and how this area was so important to the glass world, and then how the birth of the studio glass movement actually started around here as well, with the experimentations of Keith Cummings and people of his generation, and what that effect led on. So there's going to be the sort of the initial story of how we came to be, if you like, and then various areas within the museum are going to have revolving displays, so that it's hopefully going to be something that people want to revisit time and time again, because there's something new to see every time.
And also having your studio right next door to the museum, I mean, it makes a very exciting sort of prospect for visiting.
Yeah, I think I a few years ago had the opportunity to we were looking at where we wanted to be based, and there was a serious option of buying a unit on a trading estate, and the idea of investing in something in that manner, so that could possibly be something I could sell off and could be my pension, but I love the idea of being part of something like this. It's sort of a bigger story, and I thought, well, actually, glassmaking is quite special. There's no I'm biased, but there's no material quite like it to watch being created. When you see a glass artist in the hot glass studio working the material well, it's quite a magical thing to witness, and that's in today. That's today as we stand here now with all this technology around us, and then it's sort of mind blowing that these guys were doing it hundreds of years ago. So it should bring home to visitors how if it's difficult with us guys right here right now. It should amaze people what was created years ago as well. So it sort of brings the collections to life in a way.
Yeah, there's a direct link and sort of connection between the two, the historic and the contemporary, and what's happening now. So when I was talking to you a few days ago, you mentioned the UN Year of Glass 2022.
Yes, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I've done a little bit of research on it, and it sounds quite intriguing that they've labelled 2022 or announced 2022 as Year of the Glass.
I know, it's a funny one, isn't it? I mean, you kind of think, who makes these decisions? What?
How do you go about doing it? Fantastic.
Yeah, and what will 2023 be? Is it the year of the goldfish? Did you check out that one? Is that... I don't know. I've done very little research on it, but initially the museum was due to open. We were hoping to get the fit out completed in 2021, and it would have been great to open up as part of the International Festival of Glass. But due to the lockdown, we've had a few delays, and I was a little bit depressed by the fact that we weren't going to be opening up during the festival. But then when I found out that the UN were, you know, it's the year of glass, I thought, well, fantastic. So we're hopefully going to be contact them to kind of tie some events in and our openings within their calendar of events there.
Great, fantastic. Yeah, that's really good. I mean, they've sort of said that it's about technology and the fact that glass has altered the way, you know, humankind has developed, really.
Yeah.
But there is a section about art glass in it, you know, asking about artists who create glass objects as well. So it's across the board, really.
Okay. Yeah, I think there's a book called The Glass Bath Escape. Have you?
Yeah, fantastic book.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of focuses on how the East developed differently to the West, didn't it? Because they focused on ceramics and we focused on glass. And well, like somebody else said the other day, without glass, you wouldn't be able to see the stars. I thought that was nice.
No, exactly. Renaissance wouldn't have happened. We wouldn't have telescopes. You know, I mean, the whole thing has kind of changed the way we perceive the world.
Yes.
And yeah, absolutely fantastic. Oh, well, good. Well, I hope that, you know, Wolverhampton University can join you in being part of this Year of Glass in 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. It'd be good.
Hey, fantastic, Alistair. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to hand you back to Claire now because we've had about 40 minutes.
No problem.
And I think there's some people who would like to ask some questions.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much. It's been really great.
Cheers, Max.
Thanks, Max. We do have a question here. So obviously you talked about, you know, you do a lot of commission work. But in terms of your own inspiration for your own work, where do you look for inspiration?
Well, I mean, I spoke about the bubble wrap range. That's the latest one. Sometimes the concepts can be quite deep, and other times, you know, I know that my mind doesn't work consistently like that all the time. So sometimes it will just be that a source of inspiration may be a flower, and from that flower, a range of, I guess, accessible products that could be ticking over through galleries develops into what I call the daisy range. In fact, it's like a product placement here, but you know that was literally what led to this range here. So we've got it's slightly abstract, I know, but you know it's simple links that people can identify with. So quite often it's just from to generalize it would be everyday observations that I kind of home in on sometimes, and then just explore those avenues. And I kind of prefer that way of working rather than trying to force, you know, if I go out tomorrow and think, right, I need a really important subject matter, where is that? I just don't find it. But so I tend to prefer this incidental approach where kind of things just stop me in my tracks. And actually there's generally a list of things that I have in my mind that I'm still haven't had the time to get round to doing, and maybe never will. But I think from everyday observations that provides such a rich source of a rich amount of varied things that it works for me. So I'm looking around me to see what else we could. So we've got other ranges which may just be about patterns that I've noticed,
right,
in things that are completely not glass related, and I just think, well, that would be a beautiful effect on the decorative bowl as well. And so it's that those have been translated in various ideas as well.
Okay. Do you ever work with other materials with glass, or are you solely just a glass guy? I'm solely glass. Yeah.
But having said that, you know, the chandelier we're working on at the moment, the end result is just glass, but we've had to produce a plaster of Paris former. So there's a lot of mold making, and you know, I think to work within glass, you kind of need to conquer and master a whole host of other skills with other materials. And it's funny, you see, I mean, we work with metal tools, newspaper, and the glass is formed before you actually get to touch the glass. You know, you're working with all these other things prior to actually handling the glass because of the temperatures involved. So the end result is predominantly glass though.
Okay, right, thank you. Thanks very much. That was so interesting. I mean, for somebody like me who hasn't really got a lot of knowledge around glass making, you know, I think I'll sort of look at glasswork quite differently now, and I love the idea of your bubbles. I think that's just something really nice about that idea.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is there anything else that either of you would like to add?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered quite a lot in a short.
A huge amount.
Yeah.
Great.
Can I just ask, do you make purely for pleasure? You know, is there something which you just go into the hot shop and you just make for the sake of it that is very you?
Yeah, I think yes, I do. I like to leave myself reward, and so if I've been working hard, and quite often the demand for what I do sometimes is very heavily weighted towards the Christmas season, and so everybody in the studio kind of knows that they'll go, when are we having the play? Because they kind of know that I'll try and set aside a number of days where we just it may sound frivolous, but we just play. But I find that play really informs the next generation of ideas.
Yeah.
And so there's usually it's strategically placed after we've had a heavy workload and finished a really nice project, and it's gone out the door, and we can reward ourselves with a bit of play. Or for instance, I know now that I've committed to doing a collaboration with Vanessa Cutler for Simon Bruntel's exhibition for the International Festival. So I need to have a play with Vanessa at some point in the next month. And there's a play that I'd like to have, which is, I guess, if the idea works, may well be the pieces that I apply to the next Biennale with. But yeah, in play is
very important.
Really important.
Yeah.
Really important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, great. We've got a couple of questions coming, Alistair. Lynn, she asks, has COVID lockdown helped you hone your creativity?
I think what it's done is yes, I think it has, and the reason for that is, as I say, being a trustee for the British Glass Foundation, being here on site at the main point of contact for the museum and my studio. My life has been a bit of a whirlwind, and the lockdown meant that I had time to stop and think and really start to focus on what I wanted to do for the next 2 to 3 years, and so that in itself allowed me a bit of time to just a bit of headspace actually away from the world. The phone stopped ringing, which is sort of unheard of, and that you don't realise at the time, but all these interruptions do stop the creativity, because once you get into a flow and the ideas start running, it does pick up a bit of pace. So it has helped the creativity, and I do think we're going to need a lot of creative skills to overcome a lot of solutions over the next 12 to 18 months, and so it was a valuable time, really.
I think you've just answered Lynn's other question about has the stillness of early days given you time to think, but you've just kind of told us that. So
yeah.
Yeah, I think definitely lockdown has been positive for a lot of reasons. I think it's and surprising, and it's made us all sort of think very much outside the box.
Yeah.
And quite challenging, but I think in some ways that's really pushed us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you feel about that with your practice, whether that sort of made you go off in different directions.
Well, I think at my lowest point, you know, in self-reflection, you know, if you're there with your own company and your own mind, you can't think, well, should I just give up? And I thought, no, do you know what? I bloody love what I do, pardon my language, but, you know, I'm not going to give up. And so, yeah, I do think it has been really good in a lot of ways, because you do, I think I keep mentioning finding solutions and thinking about solutions, but it's not only that, but I think for me it helped me identify further ambitions, you know. So you know, I had somebody say to me, you know, it's all right to give up, you know, and they described how they'd set themselves this challenge of making a certain piece, and it was using a Venetian technique. It was a fairly tricky process, and they practiced it for a few months, and they conquered it, and then decided that, having done that, they lost all the wind from their sails. In effect, they kind of they achieved what they set out to, and didn't know where to go from there. And they were saying to me, you know, you've achieved quite a lot, Alistair. You know, it's all right to give up yet. And I just went, yeah, but I actually don't know what I'm aiming for, but I know I'm not ready to give up yet. I'm sure there's more exciting things that will be coming ahead in the next 2 years, and I'm not quite ready to quit right now. So it was as valuable in just identifying that I was hungry for more, really.
Oh, great, thank you. Max, any more questions?
No, I'm kind of done with my questioning, my interrogation. So, you know, I think I've grilled Alistair quite a lot.
Okay, thanks very much, both. Alistair, brilliant, super interesting, and hopefully we'll get you on here again sometime.
Absolutely,
and have a bit of an update of what you've been up to, and thanks very much. Really interesting. So again, thanks to Max as well, of course. Great questions. Just want to say to you all, thanks for joining us. Our next ArtsFest Online event will be in just a short while at 4:30 p.m. with Lisa Blower and RM Francis. Hope you can make it. See you soon.
Thank you.